Hey everyone, welcome to Jane Office Hours. I am Kendell Hagensen and I'll be your host today. I am a somatic psychotherapist and multidisciplinary clinic owner. I am also a wellness business coach and founder of Wellness Center Creators. And we'll be talking to Nick Meier today. Welcome, Nick. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey there, my name is Dr. Nick Meier. I am a chiropractor in Iowa, and that's the main thing I do. Aside from that, I'm on the Jane team and helping out where I can on the Facebook group.
Yes, and Nick and I are both Jane ambassadors, and we met about a year ago last summer in person at a Jane event, and we are happy to be here today. So, we're going to chat about some things we wish we knew before we opened our practices. So, first, Nick, I'd love to ask you about office spaces because I feel like this is the first thing that a lot of people are looking at when they're going to start their practice. So, what do you wish you knew before you went into that first commercial office space?
So my origin is a little forced, unfortunately. I was going to join my mentor in practice, and then that fell through. He sold his practice. I ended up kind of needing to figure it out with not enough funds. I wasn't planning on opening a practice, I was going to join. Um, so my very first practice, I ended up joining another chiropractor who had a second adjusting room. I paid him rent as an independent contractor for that space. I probably had 350 to 400 square feet of dedicated to me space and then some various shared office space, but it was very small. Um, that one was kind of, I made do with what I had to have. And 4 years later, I finally relocated to where I currently am. Are you curious of all of that step?
Yeah, so I think your story is probably pretty common where a lot of providers start out in a rental situation or subleasing or a contractor situation. Once you made that leap to a bigger space, did you already know about all these things like tenant improvements and, what you could ask for in your lease or, was it a
No.
good experience for you? Or if you could go back, what would you do differently?
So when I relocated, I first off was looking at location. So there was one location I looked at. It was more on the outskirts of the Des Moines, Iowa metro. It would have been fine, but not as heavily trafficked other than people commuting. Commuting is not necessarily the best traffic. I either want to be in a residential area or a large business area that people are going to be going to for their work or to buy various goods throughout the day. So location was the first thing I made sure with this location. However, I did not know about something called tenant improvement allowance. That's when a landlord for a space offers some additional funds when you're renovating their building that you're sublease or that you are leasing, and those funds can be used towards the renovation expenses. One thing I wish I knew about tenant improvement is most of the time it is a reimbursement. So the total rent, my space right now is about 1,900 square feet. I have a couple adjusting rooms, an X-ray machine, various different rooms to this place, but I did not expect that the total renovation, which I think I spent $119,000 in total on this renovation. It was almost an empty shell. All of the walls needed framing and electrical work, plumbing, painting. It all had to be through a contractor. So I think it was $116,000 in total, of which 66,000 I ended up paying for, but the rest of it, almost 50,000, was tenant improvement allowance. I had to contact many, many banks in order to try to find one who would work with me and give me some funds. They ended up giving me a line of credit that I could use for the construction build out. That was a one-time use. If I used a dollar, then instead of $50,000, for example, they would give me $4,999 was remaining. Once I used it, it was gone. They they did help me out further than that, but that's unrelated to all of this. But definitely continue shopping around banks and definitely look at the lease agreement to make sure every single detail not just benefiting the landlord, as they're the one who drafts it, right? It's going to benefit them. Try to figure out where you can make tweaks so that it benefits you.
Yeah, I agree with Nick here. I have a few kind of top tips when you're looking for a commercial space. And the first one is to understand that nothing is free. Even when they say free rent, it's not free. It's typically worked into your lease over time. You'll often see this term of abated rent, and they'll call it free rent, where you're not paying for a few months at first, but you are paying at some point. Same with tenant improvements, they're working it into your lease. I would highly recommend working with a commercial broker if you're looking for a space, especially if it's like for a group practice or a larger space that you're looking for, and always have an attorney review your lease agreement because, like Nick said, they are writing it to benefit themselves. So all of those are great tips. Also, plumbing is the most expensive thing ever. And just to know if you've never done it before, and if a contractor asks you, this is my best tip of all time. This is what I got. If a contractor asks you if you want more outlets in your space, the answer is yes. Put them everywhere you can, because especially if you're building like a wellness center or a group practice, you never know when you might need to plug something in, and you can't. It's really much more difficult and costly to add them later. So
Just
those
to
are our
have an
tips there.
electrician show up will cost money, not even just the materials, but just for them to be there.
Yeah.
Actually, in my bathroom plumbing, to go on that note, to move a toilet from one corner to another corner due to needing to put the door right where the toilet used to be. And then I added just a smidgen of plumbing to have a drain or laundry needed to be added in. So a drain needed to be added in. All of that, they quoted me $14,440. I don't know how they come up with that number exactly on a bid,
So
but
sounds like a deal.
yeah, they took the entire. That was exactly what they collected, and it took them approximately 2 business days to do it. Not at the same time; they came once and then came back, but 14,000 for 2 days of work. I was amazed.
Yeah.
Concrete, of course, had to be pulled into and things, but what a racket plumbing.
Okay, let's dive into hiring your first employee, hiring staff members. I think this is one of the most asked questions by coaching clients, and how to hire that first person, or what do you wish you would have done differently. So um, I know you have some stories about your first hires, and we'd love to hear those, and what do you wish you would have known?
Yeah, so when I moved to this location, I got uh, ambitious and thought I would try to also do some interviews at the old hole in the wall office before this one was even done. And I was being proactive. I thought I'm doing everything I possibly can, and trying to grow as quickly and make good changes to help my office grow. When you have staff, that tends to be the case. I did several interviews. I looked people up on Facebook. I did everything that you can possibly do to try to identify the best applicant, and I made somebody an offer. This was I want to say 22-year-old female. She worked in healthcare for 5 years or so prior. She seemed to know very well what she was doing, seemed like a professional, therefore, had a house, had a dog, was married at 22, and here I am 32 now. At the time, I'm thinking, wow, this person has it together. They know that their life trajectory and are going for it. So I made her an offer. She accepted. Um, I then tried to get a hold of her for doing some training. And the day that she was supposed to show up for training, I I didn't expect her to show up. I kind of had an idea because um, anybody who has an iPhone, you know that it's blue text messages when you text somebody with an iPhone, and green when it's outside of that. Um, I messaged this person previously, it was blue. All of a sudden it was green. And then I tried to call her since it didn't go through, and it went straight to voicemail. And I thought, did she block me? Sure enough, she had. what she ended up doing is she accepted a different job offer and then didn't communicate to me, which I get it, I guess, but she proactively blocked my number so
Yeah.
that she could avoid the conversation. I
Yeah.
was amazed. This is truly she ghosted me. Kind of, I felt like I got dumped by somebody I didn't even know I was dating, you know. But she just truly just bounced. I then decided, I already have an office. My original plan for the office didn't work out. Now my original plan for a front desk person didn't work out. I am really good at taking care of my own stuff. Now, my situation is very different than yours, Kendall. I know that you have many, many staff. So I handle my own billing. I handle my own taking the x-ray, radiology reports, adjustments, phone, scheduling, everything all myself. And that I definitely don't want to say having staff isn't valuable because they truly are very valuable. I now have Dr. Gavin with me. So I have two chiropractors and no staff. Eventually, I do plan to add staff in, but right now it's just us and we're handling it all just fine. But Dr. Gavin, he approached me and I came up with well, he and I both discussed the employment terms. Most of the time, an associate would start off at approximately 30%. It varies depending on the exact situation, the exact profession, things like that. But uh, typically, my schedule would be completely full, and I'm turning people away. So a provider would be getting the spillover of those excess patients. But since I am not necessarily full on my schedule yet, I set 46 hours of availability a week, which is a lot. I'm not necessarily
Wow.
working that whole time. I run errands and things. Uh,
That's a topic for another day, Nick.
that
Work on
sure
the
is.
balance.
My girlfriend says the same thing. Um, but Dr. Gavin, he and I came up with a pretty good arrangement for the two of us that was mutually beneficial. He has more manual therapy type of training than I do, and I have more X-ray training than he does. So we really go hand in hand quite well, and patients truly do love having that relationship in the office between us. Plus, they can see if you have a second provider, it adds credibility to your profession. You can have somebody say, and I agree with Dr. Nick, he was exactly right with this, whatever. And the patient's respond saying, wow, they really know what they're talking about. So um, I think front desk is valuable. Maybe Kendall, you have some points on that.
I do for sure. And what you're talking about is really so helpful around when you hire your first practitioner besides yourself. It's really important to not hire a clone of yourself. And to, like Nick's talking about, his other chiropractor specializes in some other things. And so it helps diversify what they're doing in their business. But of course, I have a lot of stories like the ghosting. The ghosting phenomenon is very common present day, and even more so post COVID. And we're more from the same generation where it's pretty shocking and feels disrespectful, and but to others it's a pretty common practice of, well, I'm just going to accept three different jobs and then ghost the two employers that I decide not to go with, which is unfortunate. I have lots of stories like that, and things that have not gone well. But what I've learned most over the years is that at the end of the day, when you're hiring, whether it's support staff or providers, it's so much more about the people and less about the modality or even clinical skill at first in a lot of situations. And so there are a few things that are top priority for us when we're hiring at our clinic. And to give some context, our clinic is multidisciplinary. So sometimes we're hiring for acupuncture, sometimes for counseling, sometimes for massage therapists, so kind of across the board. But these three principles apply no matter what. And the first one is clarity. So being as clear as you can about every part of the process when you are recruiting and hiring. And that starts with your job posting, putting as much detail in there as possible. and what you expect from that person. What will they be paid? What are your company values? And being really clear with yourself on who you're looking for, because it might be a great person, a great provider, but not actually a fit for the position. And a big lesson over the years is that something that I might think is clear, the person sitting across from me does not think it's clear. And so the work is around, how do we understand what clarity means to the person across from us? Second one is around values. So, of course, including your values in your job posting, but also understanding your top 3 values of that person that you want to hire to your team. So, what are the most important things about them when you're looking for that person? So, for example, for us, very first, they have to be passionate about life and learning. Number 1. Number 2, they have to be so incredibly passionate about collaborative, holistic care, because that's what we do at our clinic. So if they just want a job, but they don't actually care about the collaborative effort and supporting that patient as a team, not a fit. And number 3 is, do they know themselves? Do they have insight about themselves and really know who they are as a person? And all of that comes before clinical skill. And those are some of the ways that we avoid kind of hiring type mistakes.
Now, Kendall, do you have any specific interview questions that you maybe ask in order to try to coax that kind of a response out of somebody to check in?
Yeah. So we ask a lot of kind of personality based interview questions right off the gate. So I'll ask people like, how would your best friend describe you? How would your, past employer describe you? And or I'll just point blank ask them, how do you deal with conflict? Tell me what you know about yourself when conflict comes up. And you can tell immediately if they really know who they are. Because I'd rather hire someone who says, you know what, I've just learned about myself. I really avoid conflict at all costs. And here are those behaviors that I notice about myself when there's a conflict coming up. And here's what's been effective in the past with supervisors. I would much rather hire that person than the person over here that says, you know what, I just get along with everybody.
And I love it when
Right.
somebody is caught off guard by the interview question. They're like, well, you watch their
That's a
personality,
good
body
question.
language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we do have a 4-step interview process, and this is one of the biggest things that you can do is to slow down. Hire slow, fire fast. You've probably heard that over time. And so we have 4-step interview process: initial interview with a leadership member, second interview with another leadership team member and the lead of the modality, third interviews with the whole staff, fourth interview is practical. Now, if you're watching this and you're going, well, it's just me hiring someone else, or I don't have, a whole staff, that's fine. But the practical portion of the interview is really, really important. So if you're going to hire a massage therapist, they should give you a massage before you hire them. So there's so much on this topic of hiring. We're going to move on from it for the sake of time, but we could talk all day about this. Nick, let's talk about some tangible tools that help us run our practices that we might have wished we would have known about at the beginning. One of those would be software. And of course, we're huge Jane fans and we're using Jane now. But what were those software tools that you used at the beginning of your practice that maybe you wasted money on or didn't need or wish you would have used?
So again, when I opened my practice, I basically had, I think I had $12,000 to my name when I found out I needed to open a practice rather than join a practice. And I was fresh out of school, no job, no leads on a job, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I invested $10,000, I think, into my office. Was living with my folks, and I had about 3 months to survive with my rent being very generously low from the guy I was renting from. Um, I I wish that I had not been in. I'm a very frugal person, is the point of that. I wish that I had taken just a little bit of income and putting it towards like an app to track my mileage. That way, any business deductible trips that I was taking, which in your first year or whenever you're doing a whole lot of renovations, or when you need to make trips back and forth in order to set things up, going to the store, everything should be tracked. I was literally using Google Maps. Google Maps has a timeline function that can track my location, and I would then once a year when I was getting ready for taxes go through and try to figure out which ones were personal, which ones were business. I'd take a photo of my receipt. So I'm correlating it with my phone photo app, and I mean, it was a lot of extra work just to have the tax deduction. Oh my gosh, why didn't I just spend $50 on an app to track my mileage? Aside from that, for accounting, I put it all in Excel, and my accountant said, "Yeah, you can use Excel. That works great, no problem." Um, I now use a software called Wave. I don't know if anybody has heard of that one. And if you guys have any questions about it, feel free to throw stuff in the chat, of course. But um, Wave is very similar to QuickBooks, except it's free. There's, of course, a few missing features whenever something is free, but it works really, really well for me. It syncs up with my bank. I don't know if it syncs up with every bank, but it syncs up with mine. So I'm able to have everything, income or expenses, and I just sort things as I need to in there. That's the main one outside of using Jane, of course.
Yeah. I started really small as well. And of course, I just made things way harder than they needed to be, and used too many systems at the beginning because we are a multidisciplinary practice. So we were kind of piecing together EHRs. I did not know about Jane when we first opened. So it was a very clunky process. I think if I could go back, I think what's really common for new providers is, not wanting to spend money on the softwares in the beginning or these tools, and which is understandable. But if I could go back and I could know the true value of using like Jane and Trust Driven Care, let's say Trust Driven Care existed at that time, right? If I could know the value of those two systems in combination and how much it would help me build my practice and alleviate other costs in the long run, that's what I would have done, right? But I know that I would have had a hard time someone would have had a hard time convincing me to spend that money in the beginning, right?
Good point. I forgot to mention Trust Driven Care. That's a new one that I've added in the last few months, and as well as adding a practitioner and getting involved with new insurance companies. I just bought a patient list from an office that closed, so I have not put in the amount of. What is Trust Driven Care? Caroline just asked in the chat. It is a. Well, Kendall, how about you take that? Because
sure, I got it.
I can text people, call people, but there are many other things I
Yeah.
was just saying I need to research. So go ahead.
Well, and we could answer some questions afterwards too, if you want to message us. But Trust Driven Care is a communication platform, and it does a lot of different things. It can be your web-based phone, it's texting, it's marketing, it's lots of things. But at the foundation of it, its purpose is patient communication and giving patients a much, much better clear experience. So we've been using it for a few months and are loving it. But feel free to send a message and I can tell you more about it. Nick, we've just got a few minutes left. And as we bring our conversation towards a close today, if you could go back and talk to your new practitioner self, what is that one piece of advice you would give as you're starting your own business?
Oh gosh. I would say to take more time related to a few. I guess I have a couple thoughts. One, take way more time with charting. Make sure your charting is all up to snuff with insurance companies, and take time learning about how charting will work. I have so far not been audited, but if Blue Cross Blue Shield were to look at notes from when I first opened versus now, they are drastically different. And the protections that you have with they want things like a patient's treatment goals. They want your treatment plan. If you just say, generally this person says they have pain. This is what I adjusted. This is the reasoning for adjusting, and this is the plan. That technically is not going to be enough unless you have all the meat and potatoes that they want. Um, so charting is a big one. I would get in network with a lot more insurance companies. Now that I have gotten in a few more, I wish I had done that all earlier as well. Trust-driven care, to answer your question
Yeah.
there, uh, Vena, that is the main one. It's something that you can find online, and feel free again to message us about that. It is a pretty good system with messaging, and things like Google reviews can automatically post it to social media. There's lots and lots of features on it, so it's worth taking a
Yeah,
look at
it
for
is
sure.
yeah, just go to trustdrivencare.com, and feel free to send Nick or I a message as well. We can send you the link to do a demo. But essentially, it brings all of your patient communication into one thread for each patient. So, like Nick was saying, a message from Instagram Messenger comes through to your front desk in the same way that text message does. So, it really is giving that patient a cohesive experience. Caroline is asking what accounting system I use. So, I use QuickBooks Online, and several years ago, we added in, professional CPA and bookkeeper for our business to work
BD might
alongside us.
actually be asking about billing with insurance companies with that question. I'm not 100% sure. Uh, when I
Oh
first
yeah,
opened, I
Carolina had a
used
question earlier.
uh,
Um,
when I first opened, I used Office Ally through Jane. I would download the EDI file, upload it, and now I now I send everything through the integration with ClaimMD. It works way better than Office Ally. That was fine, but ClaimMD is much, much better. If you guys aren't using that for sending claims, I would highly recommend it.
yes, we use Jane integrated with ClaimMD as well. Carolina, yes, there are fractional accounting and CFO teams out there. Feel free to send me a message. I can help you find someone in your area. Yes, Jane integrates Vena. Jane does integrate with Trust Driven Care. It syncs, so it's a different than an integration, but it syncs your patient list. If you update your patient list in Jane, it syncs over to Trust Driven Care. So your providers or your admin team can say, "Oh, I need to call Susie Q," so they can type it in and it shows right up.
I'll take a minute on trust driven care, and then we'll go on from that. But trust driven care is its own separate company, actually launched by one of the Jane ambassadors. Um, it is not part of Jane. It is not
Right.
technically integrated the same way that ClaimMD and clinic sites and other integrations happen, but
Correct.
it is able to pull data when you run a report. There's certain things that they have their own guide that will help with that setup process. But yeah, trust driven care, they have their own website, and it's a similar messaging system to oh, I'm forgetting the name of that. There's several out there. It's basically a uh like monday.com type of things. There's lots of
Yeah.
other functional things that people can use. So
Yeah.
their trust driven care is basically just the way that we can communicate with patients. We can get our phone calls on it, text message them, Google reviews, and it is an expense, but it is a good one outside of Jane, in case that's something you guys are all looking for.
And to close, maybe I'll share, what I would tell my younger self as I'm opening my business. And that would be to always focus on people and relationships before anything else, no matter how big or small your team is, and relationships within your community as well. And most importantly, buy a plunger before you open your practice. It's probably the most important tool that you can own. And I had thought of, Nick was saying before we got on, "Oh, Kendall, you're so organized with your notes." And I had thought of every detail before we opened our clinic. And then I got a call from one of my providers the very first weekend, and we did not have a plunger. So
Oh my gosh.
you're welcome.
Well, um, any funny any funny things that you've heard over the years in your practice that maybe
So
you want to
many,
close on? So
so
many.
many. We always say like, oh, only at a wellness center, and we're in the Pacific Northwest, and so in the United States, and so we have a lot of like quinoa and kombucha emergencies. Well, someone will like spill their kombucha exploded on the way to work, and this is their biggest issue of the day, you know? So we kind of make fun of ourselves for that. What about you?
I have a handful that I'm sure I could pull out, but I was just thinking earlier of something. I have a patient named Bonnie. She's a sweet elderly lady. You would think that she's not as sharp as she is. So when she says something quick, you kind of have to be ready for it. Otherwise, you think she's just saying something. But on her x-ray, I noted to her that she was kind of leaning forward a good ways. She was a couple inches forward. And then she relayed that conversation to Dr. Gavin, who works with me. Dr. Nick says that I am a few inches forward on my x-ray. And she looks him straight in the face and goes, I'm a forward woman. Obviously, she was being a little crass with that, but it was a good, funny old lady statement that just made us all smile for several days.
That's awesome. Nick, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for being here today for Jane's office hours. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say I hope this was helpful for everyone watching. And, you can catch us next month. We're going to do another office hours. And someone's asking, how do we email? Feel free, the Jane team can help you out with contact information. So feel free to message them or message me directly or Nick directly. And it's just been a joy. Thanks so much, Nick.
Yeah, you guys can always get a hold of me on Facebook. I will get to things whenever I get a chance. So find me on the Jane Facebook group, and I'm happy to respond to people there if they have a need. Of course,
Have a great day,
support at
everybody.
Jane app. Yep. See everybody.
Bye.